So at the end of the last video, we contracted these ogres to help us battle this spider queen, both of which end up dying, and I was going to use the items they drop to make Samwise a poisoner arcane trickster build. The first red flag with the build is there's a 2-week-old thread talking about how useless Mage Hand is and how the arcane trickster's special version of the Mage Hand ability isn't actually special at all. The arcane trickster also only gets 2 spell slots, which are rechargeable once per long rest, and even if this was buffed to recharge on short rests or even before each battle, I still probably wouldn't even consider the arcane trickster over the thief for reasons I'm about to show. We can cast our main spell from stealth to give us an advantage, and I think I finally understand this mechanic now. We roll a 20-sided die twice, and we use the higher of those two in this equation to determine whether or not the spell hits. If it does hit, we then roll an 8-sided die twice, add those numbers together, plus what we roll on this 4-sided dice, and boom, there's the damage. That ability can only be casted twice between long rests though, so let's take a look at the cantrip, which can be casted as much as we want. This thing has a pretty pitiful 3-meter range and cannot be casted from stealth, and as you're about to see, the damage is pretty pitiful. If we compare it to sneak attack using a very basic hand crossbow, I mean, must I say more? We give that gear over to Gale, who has the same poison ability but has 4 spell slots, and he can recharge 2 of them between long rests, meaning he can cast it 6 times, and if needed, he can cast it 2 more times with increased power using level 2 spell slots, and then later he even gets more higher tier spell slots so he can cast it even more times. Because Gale now has 17 intelligence from the helmet, I can respec him to give him a bunch of charisma, because no one currently has any charisma, and then we put all the rest of his points to make him quite a bit tankier. I started this episode out by trying the arcane trickster build on Sam, but we're about to respec him into a pretty crazy build involving these boots we got in the last episode. They give increased damage after you dash, and normal classes can't attack after dashing because dashing is usually a regular action, but thieves can dash as a bonus action and then use a regular action to attack. Unfortunately, these boots are medium armor, and as we're about to find out, rogues get quite a heavy accuracy penalty for using medium armor, so much so that I don't know if the boots are worth using. Once you get to level 4, you can choose a feat, and one of them is medium armor proficiency. Not only does this allow Sam to use any medium armor, he can now use shields, and that's going to make him quite a bit tankier. Also, on a side note, the medium armor proficiency gives him 1 dex, and this 1 dex is going to bump him up to the next threshold, which you get like every 2 to 3 points of dex, and so now you get some extra bonuses with stuff relating to dexterity like thievery, stealth, and yeah, pretty much anything rogue related is dex. We're about to find some huge upgrades for Sam, including a pretty badass shield in this goblin camp. At the entrance is a goblin girl who we freed from the druid camp in an optional event. Had we not freed her, I'm guessing we would have had to fight our way in here, but I'm not sure. The goblin girl brings us to her leader, who wants us to backstab the people back at the grove by opening up their front gate when they show up. The obvious answer here is we tell her that we'll do it because we can choose to back out later once she shows up. I do find it kind of odd that our companions care about what we tell her, because for all they know, we could be lying to her. Like, if you want to give your opinion after we backstab the grove people, then fine, but why now? Anyway, she tells us that she's going to attack at next light, which I believe means after we do a long rest, but we just did a long rest at the end of the last episode, so we're going to get some other things done first. Starting with checking out this goblin trader. These boots are pretty good for our warrior, who can already jump pretty far with her now 18 strength. She got 1 extra from the heavy armor master feat, which I chose just to make her more tanky. I'm sure there's better ones, but right now she's just tanking for Sam, and he's pretty much going to be doing all the damage. Our healer is not currently wearing boots, and these give targets that she heals temporary hit points, which I believe works as kind of a shield. And then if she does Prayer of Healing, it applies that shield to everyone, which is pretty cool. And then this ring is kind of situational. After she heals, she gets some extra fighting stats, and she does have this spear that we picked up in the last episode that can blind on melee hit, and I think procs quite a bit. I think it's definitely worth using. The best thing the trader had by far was these gloves, as not only they increased range weapon damage, rogues don't have the proficiency with longbows, and longbows do quite a bit more damage than short bows. Even without the enchant, it still does 2 more top end damage, and it just so happened this trader had a green longbow for sale, so we grab it for Sam. Before leaving, this goblin high priestess says we've been touched by the absolute, which I think is code for she knows we're a fellow wormhead. She wants to give her mark to 1 person, and from what I've gathered, it only has upsides, aside from the fact that some companions can disapprove. We ask her if she can help remove the worm from Sam's head, and she gives us this drink which Sam's able to detect as a sleeping potion. The easiest play here is just to drink it anyways, because when Sam wakes up, an assassin comes out of nowhere and saves him. Our party's in the other room, so that probably wasn't necessary, but tell your master thanks anyways, Sam says. The priestess drops a couple items that require the wielder to have the Absolutes brand. The neck piece is essentially a free 10 HP between long rests, but mainly the shield I thought was really cool because we just had changed our build to be a shield build, and Sam gets the effect of the +1 of saving throws, which I think is basically just magic resist. It also has this buff that gives 5 temporary HP per turn for 10 turns, which ends up being a whopping 50 HP, assuming you're taking damage every turn, and his concentration doesn't get broken by a spell or something. Before leaving the goblin camp, we run into this very interesting NPC, which can give a permanent buff. You gotta pass 3 dialogue checks and basically act like you're really into it. Sam does fail the second dialogue check, but uses an inspiration to reroll, and we barely pass it. And then you get an advantage for the third dialogue check, so you get to roll 2 dice and use the highest roll. And we do pass that, so Sam now has a permanent buff, which activates when he's low HP.
Sweet child. You bore the pain like a true believer. I am proud to have served you this penance. And on a personal note, thank you. That was positively divine.
Our cleric really enjoyed watching Sam get tortured, so we get the inspiration point that we just spent back. Our party's still pretty healthy, so I don't feel the need to long rest yet, and we head back down to where we killed the spider boss and drop down into the Underdark. At the entrance is 2 level 4 Minotaur, and as you can see, Sam is pumping out the damage now. This fight, like many in this place, is a complete mess, because the mobs can just jump wherever they feel like. The main strategy here is we basically just throw our fighter girl at the Minotaur and use this ability Menacing Strike as much as possible. This attack does connect, but it doesn't frighten, but then she uses Action Surge to give her another attack, and the next Menacing Strike does frighten. That frighten attack does cost 1 of her 4 superiority dice, which are like caster spell slots, but these replenish after a short rest, which makes them a lot more expendable. And as far as balance, if you remember, the Arcane Trickster only had 2 spell slots rechargeable after a long rest. Yeah, there's another reason why the Arcane Trickster is complete garbage in my opinion, but correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. The Thief, on the other hand, is super useful as he's got 2 bonus actions and can use 1 to disengage, so he can run away from these Minotaur without them being able to attack him in melee, which is huge in a fight like this because they can jump pretty much wherever they want, so they're always going to be able to stick on Sam, but he can just disengage away. The wizard's also putting in some work by upcasting Ray of Sickness, and the level 2 version of this does 1 to 8 extra poison damage, and 15 is a pretty mid-roll for that, but we do get the poison effect off. I also respect him to the Illusionist wizard path, which gives him this really useful bonus action cantrip. Because it's a cantrip, he can cast it as much as he wants, and because it's a bonus action, he can cast it after casting his damage spell or after he attacks, and essentially the mobs will face wherever we place it down, and that allows Sam to pretty much always be able to stealth and get sneak attacks off. And yeah, I thought this fight was definitely kind of a weird difficulty spike considering you just entered the zone and you've never seen a jumping charging Minotaur before. Somehow we do manage to beat it first try, and though Gale did get knocked out, since we got to him quick enough, we didn't even have to use a resurrection scroll on him. The first Minotaur drops a decent amount of gold and an A gate. I'm still not sure if gems in this game actually have a purpose, but I have been hanging on to him. The second Minotaur drops even more gold and a pretty situational amulet. The wearer takes double damage from bludgeoning, but only half from slashing. But I do feel like you gotta kind of know what enemies' damage types are, so I'm probably not gonna ever use that amulet. Further in the Underdark, we gotta pull a sword from a stone, and our cleric is religious, plus we gave her the 17 intellect headband for this event, so she gets some extra bonuses there. The weapon's a versatile longsword, meaning it can be used as either a two-hander or a one-hander, and as a two-hander, it does have less damage than Lae'zel's greatsword, and even less if she equips it with a shield, but she is gonna be more tanky, and once per short rest, she can either debuff nearby enemies or buff nearby allies with it. The game autosaves here, which is very rare for it to do, and I think it knows you're about to save scum. What's about to come out of this hole is a creature that's very tanky, can jump really far, far and has an AoE acid attack. We have Sam start the fight, and I think dexterity helps him be able to land on his feet here. The bullet starts the fight by jumping away from Sam, so he's able to get a few free shots off before it gets to us, which is pretty important because just like other mobs in this place, this thing can jump huge distances and do huge damage. Gale gets a really nice crit with just a level 1 ray of sickness, and then Sam gets another huge sneak attack off, and that's pretty much going to be it for this fight. The thing burrows underground, and you're supposed to be able to fight it later in different areas, but I think my game was bugged and it wouldn't pop back out of the ground, and it seems like that's kind of an issue that's going on with this mob. So yeah, we don't get to see the loot, unfortunately. I found out from the comment section that you can actually steal things in turn-based mode, which is a lot safer than doing it in non-turn-based mode, because this guy cannot turn around and catch us while we're in turn-based mode. And because Sam just has so much movement with his 2 bonus action dashes, stealing things using this method is actually pretty safe. This trader has a chest behind him that's actually pretty hard to open, 20 difficulty on it, but we do have so many modifiers, so it's not too hard for Sam. And among the loot in the chest is quite a few scrolls, some gold, and mainly the scroll of fly, which our wizard can actually learn later. For a certain amount of gold, a wizard can read any of these scrolls and learn the ability, but fly is a level 3 spell that requires a level 3 spell slots, so we're not there yet. And speaking of the wizard, we do buy him a staff from this trader once we're done with all this thievery, and this thing gives a bonus to spell save DC, which is basically like magic pen, and +1 to spell attack rolls, so it's easier for him to hit. Further into the Underdark, we run into a hook horror, which is about to call in 2 more of its friends, and like other creatures in the Underdark, they can jump really far and knock down whoever they land near. The wizard's now out of spells, so he's going to become kind of an off tank by using this cantrip that reduces all physical damage done to him for 2 turns. Our cleric has this cantrip as well, and it was not active when the final hook horror, which is almost dead, knocks her out here. And then to make this fight even harder, there's been a caster working with these monsters, randomly throwing out crowd control abilities like this AoE sleep effect that we see here. The sleep does also hit the hook horror, and Sam's able to finish it off with the sneak attack, and that leaves up just their caster. And I thought a really cool kind of cinematic end to him would be Lae'zel doing this huge jump, and then in hindsight what I should have done is push him off the edge, although if we did that I don't think we would have got any of his loot. The theatrics do not pay off here, as this guy has this ability Thunder Wave.
What the fuck?
Yeah, that was just the most completely unnecessary play, because Sam was easily able to outduel this guy from range. Thankfully we can still resurrect Lae'zel because her soul's still here and she didn't lose any of her gear or any stuff in her backpack. The caster drops this really high value ice crystal that is part of a weapon, and we need 2 more parts to assemble it. And then these scribbled notes possibly are hinting at where to find the next part. Before we worry about that, we grab the Susur tree bark, which is required for some plans that we found in the last episode. And that's the only real reason we came down here in the first place. There's 3 different weapons that you can make, and I wanted to make the dagger, but we needed a common dagger, and I was thinking one of these goblins would have a dagger, because from what I remember it was pretty common to find daggers on goblins. We kill every single goblin in this blighted village, and surprisingly none of them drop a dagger. And there was quite a few goblins here. I want to say we took out at least 10, maybe 15, and I would show more of the fighting, but they were all level 1s and 2s, so Sam was pretty much able to one-shot most of them. We finished looting up the village, and we find more than loot in this barn. Because I'm not sure what I can show on YouTube, I'll just show this scene and you can infer what they were doing when we walked in on them. If we were level 2 or 3, like you are when you enter the goblin village, this fight might have been hard, but since we're now level 4, it's pretty easy, and the wizard does get a very helpful crit. There was quite a bit of loot in the barn, nothing really of note, but I want to say it was worth at least 100 gold of stuff, maybe more. And next to the barn, we do finally find a dagger stuck in this very tough piece of meat, but it's a green dagger, and to create the masterwork weapon, we can only use a common one. In the end, we just end up buying a dagger from a vendor for 40 gold, and using the Susur bark as fuel, we're able to make this Susur dagger. And I was originally thinking it'd be pretty good on Sam to counter casters, as it silences enemies on hit, but not only are daggers pretty trash with their base damage, I couldn't really see many situations where Sam would be doing melee, And after doing a bit of thinking, Lae'zel's always doing melee, so the Sister Greatsword would probably do much better on her. And like the dagger, it does silence on hit, and it actually has more damage than the other two-hander she's using. So to make that weapon instead, because you can only make one Sister weapon, we needed to buy a Greatsword from a vendor, and I believe we did sell one to this trader back at the Druid camp, but he wanted to rip us off for it. I think we sold it to him for like 30 gold, and he wanted to sell it back to us for 200, which I thought was extremely unfair, so I didn't feel too bad stealing it back from him. To do this safely, I found this companion just a few steps away from where we are now, and respect him into a bard so he can get this ability which gives us advantage on stealth checks. And just on a side note, it did feel weird respecking him into a completely different class, because originally he's supposed to be a warlock, and moving further, I stay away from switching people out of their main class, but I did feel like it was okay to switch people to different specs within their class, although I'm still not sure how I feel about swapping people's attribute points around. Anyway, so Sam is now rolling 2 dice for dexterity checks, and his dexterity is really high, so I was thinking there's pretty much no chance that the guy is going to detect us while we pickpocket all of his stuff. We do somehow fail pickpocketing this scroll that says difficulty 5, which I thought that was the number you needed to roll, but we have +8 bonus to our roll, so I'm not sure what that 5 number means. In order to pickpocket all of his gold, you can see there's not very high of a chance, I guess. Based on that little red line, I guess that's how much chance you have to pickpocket the thing, versus you can see it's a pretty high chance to pickpocket the greatsword. And because we've been selling everything to this guy because he's really close to waypoint, I didn't want to potentially piss this guy off, so we do save scum and we only take the greatsword. If we do ever end up not needing to trade with this guy anymore, we'll go all out and try to pickpocket him for everything he's got, and then if he does resist, we'll just kill him or whatever. After stealing the greatsword, we go back to the forge and turn it into a Sister Greatsword, and moving forward, Lae'zel is going to be using that weapon. Back in the Underdark, we get this ring for Sam, which gives him +2 damage on melee and range attacks, which is quite a lot. Deeper into the Underdark, this dwarf is looking for a slave who stole some boots. It appears this guy is not a good guy, aside from the whole slavery thing. He's been killing the mushroom people, which up to this point were peaceful.
They broke our peace. They killed our young.
We find the runaway slave who gives us these boots, which allows you to dash as a bonus action, which the rogue can already do, but our fighter can definitely use them for extra mobility. We bring the boots back to the dwarves for this quest, thinking that the reward they give us will potentially be better than the boots, but the rewards are trash. This robe is, I believe, for a monk class, and we don't even have a monk. Feeling ripped off, Sam now contemplates doing the quest to kill these dwarves that the mushroom people gave us, and we do come back sometime later to do it. The rewards weren't really worth mentioning, but I do think I learned a new mechanic when it comes to stealth and ambushing people. When you do attack them and you're in stealth, it will roll to see if you get bumped out of stealth or not. And like you can see here, we pass the roll, so we're not in combat yet, which allows us to get another free shot off on him and we kill the dude. And then we're gonna also try to assassinate the really evil dwarf guy. And I feel like we did get pretty lucky here, as we do not get bumped out of stealth, and we have a buff to give Sam dexterity advantage, but he wasn't even using it here. We pass, I think it was 5 consecutive stealth rolls here, and this guy drops a weapon that kills mushroom people more efficiently, assuming they are actually considered plants, and then I'm not sure what's considered an insect or a small creature. But if you are fighting just normal things, the damage on this weapon is actually not that high. Its bottom end and top end are lower than the Sister Greatsword actually. The dwarves ask us to help save their leader, who's trapped behind these rocks, and the leader blames the slave's incompetence for him being trapped behind the rocks, and he yeets this poor gnome into the lava. Sam seems pretty unfazed by the whole ordeal, but does tell him to stop killing the gnomes because the mushroom people gave us a quest to save the gnomes. The dwarves, who are all benefiting from the gnomes' slave labor, don't like that we're trying to free their slaves, and they're now all hostile with us. And there's 10 of them that are level 5, and we're only level 4 at this point. Instead of dealing with this whole thing right now, I was gonna go on a long rest so we could deal with Minthara first, and hopefully by the time we're done with that, we're at level 5, so this thing would be a lot easier. Unfortunately, if you do long rest, the leader of the dwarves ends up dying behind these rocks, and they all leave this place forever, I guess. So yeah, it's either we deal with this now or never. The plan is to clear out the dwarves till we get to their leader, and once we free him, he won't have any friends to help out. And back at the entrance to this dwarf base, we find some jerks being mean to a slave.
Stick shit, talks like smug, and he wrecked that shroom village.
And then shagged it.
Here's to smug, nasty prick.
We sneak attack one of the dwarves and succeed in a stealth check, and then succeed in quite a few more, and by the time we finally enter combat, this girl is pretty much dead, and so there's just one other dwarf to take out.
Shit! You did it!
We do end up killing quite a few dwarves in this place, and for the most part they drop quite a few things. I would say the value on each of them is like at least 50 to 60 gold. We try to style kill these dwarves, but I'm assuming they have really high strength because they resist both of our attempts. And what I wanted to do was knock these dwarves off this ledge, and they take a bunch of damage, and the rest of our guys below would easily be able to finish them off. But that didn't really work as planned, and through all the commotion we end up aggroing a lot of extra dwarves that we did not mean to aggro. Sam makes a run for it, and he's able to outrun most of the guards except their sergeant, who's wearing those boots that give the extra dash as a bonus action. Sam technically could outrun her as he can dash 3 times, but if he only dashes twice and then uses his other action to attack her, he's able to safely do damage from range, and we do end up killing her and get our boots back. Plus this ring that increases damage by 1 of only the Thunder Wave spell, unfortunately. I thought it might increase Sam's overall damage because he's got the brand, but I tested it and no, it's just Thunder Wave's damage. The spell is good though, as it can knock people off cliffs like we saw with Lae'zel earlier. And speaking of knocking people off of things, I wanted to try to knock this dwarf into the water to see what would happen. And by this point we'd already wasted 2 of the arrows, so I thought maybe they just don't work on these dwarves or something. And so to test that, I save scummed 5 or 6 times, and every single time the dwarf resisted the knockback effect. So either they just have really high strength and they're pretty much immune to it, or maybe you just can't knock them into the river. I'm not sure. As it turns out, we didn't need to waste those arrows anyways because these guys end up getting stuck on this boat. This is the first time I've seen AI bug out like this, where I guess they think they have a path to get to us over the river, but they don't. That's 2 less dwarves we have to deal with, and one of them was a dwarf merchant who drops pretty much everything except his gold. The bow has a really cool proc on hit to make people frightened. Unfortunately, it is a short bow, so the damage is a bit lower, but not as much as it looks. If you add on Gale's magic weapon enchant, it's only 2 high-end damage lower, so it might actually be worth using, assuming the proc does work a lot of the time. If we give his sword over to Lae'zel, we'd be trading the silence effect for a 1-time per short rest AoE attack, or we could just sell the sword because it has a really high value. One guy chases us all the way back to the entrance, so we take him out, and the rest of the guys de-aggro. When they do de-aggro, all the dwarves go neutral again, and these guys didn't get the memo that we've been taking out their buddies. For some reason, the second and third dwarf don't react to their buddies being thrown off a cliff, and this one counter reacts to us trying to throw him off a cliff, but not in a very smart way, and maybe we don't get XP here because the NPCs are just too stupid. This dwarf drops a pretty crappy blue helmet. It gives damage some of the time, but like if you compare it to the green ring we got earlier, that gives 2 damage all the time. Anyway, so we clear out the rest of the dwarves, and the gnomes want us to save their friend who's trapped behind the rocks with the dwarf leader.
Freedom, or what passes for it. Do the right thing. Kill Nier. Do it.
The dwarf leader comes out, and I guess we chose better dialogue this time, because with this option, some of the dwarves are actually not loyal to Nier.
I see treachery at every turn. Not every Dwergar proves faithful to the absolute.
And though I thought we killed all the dwarves, I guess 2 of them were hiding, and only one's loyal to Nier, the other helps us out. Nier is pretty strong and has an ability which reflects melee damage, but not ranged, so Sam has no problem taking out most of his HP.
My people will find somewhere to regroup across the lake, then onto the city. If you find yourself in Baldur's Gate, seek us out.
I have no idea where Baldur's Gate is, but maybe we'll link up with him later. As for Nier's loot, he drops a Mind Flayer specimen, which I think is our 3rd, and we're about to actually have use for these now. Picking up the Moon Lantern gives us some dialogue.
Object catches your eye. A lantern, it seems, though no light flickers within.
We're about to long rest, so I don't feel bad using a level 3 spell slot on that buff I talked about earlier, which we are using to give us an advantage on stealth checks, but it can also be used for other types of checks.
You see no burner or wick. It was not fuel that lit this lamp, but magic.
The next dialogue check's also intelligence, and we still get the buff, so we roll 2 dice, and one of them would have failed.
This is pixie dust, used to illuminate a lamp. or left behind after a pixie's death.
Nier also drops the first very rare item we've come across, and on top of the Nightwalker effect, which seems pretty useful, once per short rest, the wearer can teleport a pretty good distance. 18 meters is the distance that a normal person can move if they're dashing. And then for bringing Nier's head back to the mushroom people, we get this very situational amulet. It can only be activated once per long rest and gives +2 persuasion for pretty much just one dialogue check, because the buff only lasts for 10 turns. So yeah, I don't even know if we're gonna hold on to it. We go on to explore the rest of this place, and there are a few puzzle type situations, but what I like about them in this game is they challenge our party setup. Like, we need someone to dismantle the traps, and we need people with high perception to detect the traps. I feel like this is the first time in quite a long time I've seen puzzles integrated into a game in not an annoying way. That's something I've just noticed as I've been playing from the beginning. So yeah, props to the devs for that. We make it pretty deep into this place, but everyone's fully encumbered, and there is a waypoint, so I decide we'll come back later, and we finally long rest. The rest isn't very restful, as Lae'zel explains our plan to deworm everyone is not working, and she lays out her own plan for deworming everyone. The safer play here is to use the Illithid dialogue, as there's pretty much no chance you fail, but I'm still not sure how many times you can use the Illithid dialogue, so I'm trying to save it for a really important situation. And for whatever reason, we do have advantage on this dialogue check, and we have some persuasion bonuses, so I thought there was pretty much no chance we'd fail. What I didn't realize is we'd have to roll a whopping 15, which we do thankfully roll, but the way Lae'zel's holding that knife to Sam's throat makes me think we probably should have used the Illithid dialogue.
I cannot trust my own mind, so it seems I must trust yours.
Later that night, in a dream, we're told that we're about to transform into one of those alien creatures. The dream visitor tells us she was the one who saved us from crashing into the beach, and my current theory is she's actually the alien who was there when we fell off the ship, and she was possibly the one who injected us with the worm in the first place. Or maybe that was a friend of hers, because this alien looks a bit different.
You will not become a mind flayer. Not while I'm around. I'll protect you. There is great potential within you. It comes from that parasite. Your instinct is to resist the power it gives, but you must accept it. Nurture it. I will keep it from consuming you, but for the sake of both of us, you must learn to wield it.
She goes on to explain that we're losing some big fight and I can help win it, but I gotta embrace my inner worm. The next boss we kill drops, I think, the 4th worm we've come across, and the dream girl wants Sam to open his mind to it.
Don't worry, you won't come to harm. I'll protect you.
For every new worm we find, we now get a new ability, and you can see we've already got the ability to use Illithid dialogue. The tooltip doesn't say we have limited uses of it, so from now on I guess we'll just use the Illithid dialogue whenever it's presented. The first ability we choose increases our accuracy on our first attack against something, and this is going to pair very well with Sharpshooter, which you can toggle on or off to lower your accuracy but increase your damage for that attack. We get our next feat at level 8, and we're only level 5, so it'll be a while before we can pick up Sharpshooter. And then this trait can turn an attack into a crits, but I think it does have a cooldown. It might be once per short rest or once per long rest, I'm not sure. And I wasn't sure what to do with the rest of our worms. We'll revisit this later. The worm we just picked up was from this Null boss that also drops a very interesting mace, which gives lifesteal on every attack, but it can make the wielder go mad if they stop attacking, meaning they'll attack anyone nearby, so it's kind of a risky thing to use. Sam was actually able to solo that Null boss with the bow we just got. We were testing out the Frighten effect, and it seems to have a pretty high proc rate. The reason we were up here in the first place was to grab this thievery ring, which I found kind of by accident when I was researching how stealth works. Usually I'm not going to be looking up where secret items are, and if we find them while we're traveling along, then so be it. Or maybe like if we find a hint about where to go next and I'm too stupid to figure it out, then maybe I'll look it up. Near that ring, we also find a companion who's about to leave us, so we're not gonna, check out her abilities or anything. And the reason why she's gonna leave us is we're gonna help Minthara slaughter the grove. And my reasoning for this is, so far in terms of the story, I didn't feel like there was enough pushback for choosing to use the Illithid powers. When Minthara shows up to attack the grove, she uses Illithid powers to communicate with Sam. And my idea is, because she's higher level than Sam and possibly has more control on her powers, she's able to use used illithid dialogue on Sam to convince him that siding with her and slaughtering the Grow people is a good idea, or with the help of the Grow people, Sam's able to eject the worm out of his head and be rid of his illithid powers forever. This scenario would make the idea of slaughtering the Grow people more appealing, because you're choosing to harness the illithid power to save the world over saving a small group of tieflings and druids, and they would be a sacrifice that must be made for the greater good. Choosing to help Minthara is also going to make her potentially join us later as a companion, but we lose Will, Karlach, and Halsin as potential companions. I believe Karlach and Will have a similar amount of stats as other companions, but it seemed like Halsin and Minthara had more, and Minthara seemed to have a lot more, but no one seemed to acknowledge this in any threads I read, so I'm thinking maybe her stats will lower once she joins us. Before we turn on the Grove and kill their traders, we're going to go all out on pickpocketing them, because if you do kill a trader, it won't drop all of its loot, and I'm pretty sure it doesn't drop any of its gold. With our new ring and the other buffs we have, we're able to steal some of the cheaper items at what seemed like no risk. I think if that number is negative, then you can't fail at stealing, but then if we want to steal this chain shirt for Sam, there seems to be about a 1/3 chance he'll fail if I'm reading that right. He does succeed, and this chest piece gives him bonus to dexterity checks, which is going to help him in pretty much all rogue related things. We do 2 rounds of pickpocketing this guy and sell his loot to the trader back at the Mushroom Village, and in total we get about a 1200 gold profit. And just on a side note, this did feel pretty cheesy. I think each time you pickpocket something, it should take an action or a bonus action point, or at least some movement or something, because yeah, you shouldn't be able to pickpocket 100 things in the span of 2 real life seconds. As we're trying to steal some more stuff, I forgot we were not in turn-based mode, and one of the guys turns around and catches us stealing. At this point we've stolen pretty much all we wanted, so we're just going to engage the tieflings now solo. Sam knew that turning on the tieflings was going to upset his companions too much, and they wouldn't understand his decision, so he left them back at camp. As soon as the fighting started, Minthara's army shows up, and Sam's completely cornered, so he's about to jump down to them, or we can make the tieflings jump down to them using a thunder arrow. I thought I was aiming at the ground here, but the arrow definitely connects with one of the tieflings and does not blast them the way I wanted, which was kind of lame. Sam's able to get away from them and makes it over to the horn, which normally you blow to begin the events, and it gives the tieflings a buff, but since we're now allied with Minthara's army, it gives them a buff instead. The only person that really puts up a fight on the wall is Zevlor, and he's quickly overrun. Then we meet up with Minthara and help her slaughter a bunch of level 1 tieflings in their hiding spot.
A glorious day. The Absolute will be pleased. But there is more to be done. This place is home to druids. Root them out and kill them.
I guess she can't be asked to help clear out the rest of the druids, so she sends some goblins to help out, and they're not really much help at all. I guess this is Sam's test to see if he's worthy of Minthara's love. Since we already spent so much time in the Underdark, we're pretty over level for this fight, and Sam's able to solo it with not much trouble at all. One of the main druids drops this Rune of the Wolf, and if we bring it back to the druid layer, it opens up a hidden vault. The main thing in here is what looks like a pretty ordinary glaive, but it has an ability that can be used as a bonus action after it attacks, and I believe it can be used at every turn. So yeah, I regret not pickpocketing the guy for the rune earlier and then stealing this glaive as like a level 2 or 3. I feel like it would have been really OP, but the damage is kind of falling off for a level 5. We blow up one of the sappers for a style kill on the main boss Kaga, and the amulet she drops does proc off of healing potions and applies to Sam's range weapon, so it's going to be really good for soloing. One of the final enemies is the gnome trader who we've been vendoring all of our extra goods to, and I find out here you can actually pickpocket during combat, which I think is quite silly. I stand by the idea that pickpocketing should cost either a regular action point or a bonus action point, the same way that like pushing someone or swinging a sword costs an action point. We do manage to pickpocket the guy's gold, plus he had I think the same armor pieces as the other trader, but I'm not even sure if we needed to pickpocket him at all, because we can knock him out of melee by toggling non-lethal attacks. Oh. 720 carry capacity. Holy sh! Because Sam's now heavily encumbered, he cannot move much, and the final enemy is not moving towards us. Thankfully, there is this option that allows you to flee from combat, so he goes back to the Mushroom Village to try to sell off what he can, and that trader ran out of gold, so we bought this helmet that can cast a level 2 spell. It is based on intelligence though, so I doubt Sam could use it efficiently. Back at the Grove, Sam felt pretty bad at killing the final druid, Nettie. She was really nice in her interactions with Sam, and was helping us try to get rid rid of the worm when that's what we wanted to do. Sam quickly forgets about Nettie as he tells Minthara the good news that the grove is fully cleared out. She is pleased by this and tells Sam she'll visit his camp tonight to celebrate.
As you approach your camp, the raucous celebrations have already begun. Volo has fallen into the goblin's clutches again and appears to be chronicling your misdeeds.
I'm still not sure exactly what this guy's purpose is. You have some dialogue that he can try to remove the worm from you. We rescued him from a cage that looks exactly like this back at the goblin camp, and now the goblins made another cage for him, which I thought was pretty funny.
The goblins praise the Absolute, but their celebrations also honor their leaders, Minthara and you.
When you tire of their company, come to me. Tonight, you are mine.
So I definitely cannot show this next scene on YouTube, at least not the uncensored version of it. It's pretty hardcore. So if you want to look it up, then you're going to have to get a little bit creative in your searching methods. By looking into her mind, we find more about Minthara's backstory, and we find out that she had a pretty rough life, which explains kind of where we are now, I guess. Minthara explains that while they were doing the deed, she could not hear the Absolute.
How is that possible?
And Sam shows her this item that our cleric's been carrying since the beginning.
It screams. It silences the Absolute, and it screams. What is it? What are you?
Sam showing her that item earlier really upset her, because in the middle of the night, she comes to kill Sam.
Good. You're awake. I want to taste your fear.
If you feel the dialogue here, I'm assuming later she will not join as a companion. And I think in hindsight, maybe the third option would have been okay, but we had a pretty good chance with the first, so we choose that. And then in hindsight, we're about to long rest anyways, so we should just use the amulet for the persuasion bonus. We use the cleric's buff that gives us an advantage, and thankfully we do pass the dialogue check.
That might be, but you have not been truly tested yet. But you will be. And soon. I am curious to see if you survive. I watched over you as you slept, peaceful and silent. And I spoke to our god. I asked her why she had chosen you, made you one of her faithful, when you are so clearly broken. Beautiful, but broken. There is something missing in you, and I do not understand it. When the Absolute failed to answer me, I feared that you had somehow infected me with that same absence. And so I decided that you must die. But then, a miracle happened. As I took out my blade, her voice returned to me, and she told me what I must do to purge myself of doubt. She told me to decide your fate, to determine if you are worthy. If you are, I am to send you into her embrace, at the seat of her power. In time, I believe we may be together. Travel to Moonrise. We will meet again there, at the heart of the Absolute's power. The Absolute has spoken to you already, in whispers. But at Moonrise, you will be in her presence. She will test you. If you fail, you will break. If your faith is strong, you will become something greater than yourself.